Hello everyone. Now let's discuss about communication in organizations. Many of the communication patterns that apply to the small groups also apply to communications in organizations. This is a much larger groups than the groups I have discussed in the previous videos. There are some key features of organizations that affect communication patterns among members of the organizations. The first one is structure. It is a set of procedures, relationships, and practices that provides predictability about roles, procedures, and expectations. Most organizational structures are hierarchical, which assigns members to different levels of power and status. For example, not everyone can be CEOs or managers in a company. Even though some organizations may be less rigid than others in terms of following the communication chains across levels, organizational structures still exist. The second feature of organizational communication is that it occurs in communication networks, which can be formal and informal links between members of organizations. In most organizations, people belong to multiple networks. For example, a university lecturer may belong to a social network that includes colleagues, students, and staff inside her department, and at the same time also belongs to networks outside of her department but still within the university. Nowadays, communication networks are not only in physical terms, but also virtually. Another key feature of organizational communication is the external environments. An organization is not only influenced by internal factors but also external factors because organizations are embedded in multiple contexts. The external factors may include social, political, and economic stability of a country in which the organization is located. Every organization has its own culture. Organizational culture consists of ways of thinking, acting, and understanding work that are shared by members of an organization and that reflect an organization's distinct identity. The organizational culture also affects the way members of organization communicate with each other. There are four kinds of communication that are particularly important in developing and conveying organizational culture, which include vocabularies, stories, rites and rituals, and structures. The vocabularies being used in an organization reflects and expresses its history, norms, values, and identity. For example, hierarchical language such as "yes sir" may be used in military organizations. In some organizations, masculine language may also be used, such as sub-phrases that are taken from sports like home run and touchdown, perhaps because these organizations historically have been run by men and men have been the primary or exclusive members of the organizations. Stories also convey the way people in an organization communicate with each other. There are three kinds of stories that have been identified within the organizational context. The first one is corporate stories. These are stories about the values, style, and history of an organization. Another type of story includes personal stories, in which members tell each other about themselves in organizational context, which shows how members see themselves and how they want to be seen by others in the organization. The third type of organizational story is collegial stories, which provide accounts of other members of the organizations about the organization itself or about other members of the organization. Rites and rituals are verbal and nonverbal practices that express and reproduce organizational cultures. Rites are dramatic, planned sets of activities that bring together aspects of an organization's culture in a single event. For example, the placement of an employee to a higher level of the floor in the building may signal promotion. Some organizations or departments in the organization may also have special handshakes that symbolize communality among members. Rituals, on the other hand, are forms of communication that occur regularly and that members of an organization perceive as familiar and routine parts of organizational life. For example, an organization may hold social gathering every time an employee gets a promotion as the organization rituals. Organizational cultures are also represented through structural aspects of organizational life. There are 4 structures that express and uphold organizational culture, which include roles, rules, policies, and communication networks. As in the small group, there are several communication networks in organization, which include circle, the wheel of star, hairpin, chain, and canals, multiple structures. The circle has no leader. Here, there is total equality. Each member of the circle has exactly the same authority or power to influence the group. But interactive communication can only be done in a limited way with the closest members. The wheel of star is characterized by the centralized position of a clear leader. Communication between members must be communicated through the leader. For example, the command system within the military, centered on the commander. In the hairpin structure, communication has several layers of leaders. The main leader mediates the proper communications for the members underneath them, the second layer leaders, with the parties at the top of the organization. For example, communication patterns on political parties. The leader of political party will be directly related to the party advisory board or other stakeholders and communicating with the second-tier leaders. In the chain structure, leaders are in a central position. Information goes in rotation to and from the leader. The internal members cannot communicate directly. The leader will facilitate communication between the closest members. For example, is communication patterns in intelligence agencies. The members at the very end is the information seeker in the field. Communication is limited to one another in the organization. Continuously, the information will be communicated to the leader who became the central of the communication. Similarly, instructions will be communicated on a continuous basis. Either it will be from up to the most and to end members, or it is only limited to the leader circle. The canal's multiple structures allows for optimum member-to-member communication. There are times when there is a leader within the group, but there are times when there are also no leaders. What is typical of this structure is that there is no obstacle to communicating directly between members. Similarly, communication with leaders can be done by any member without going through a hierarchical pattern. For example, communication patterns in volunteer organizations. In the organization, there are times when leaders are found, but sometimes not. Communication occurs freely and unstructured. Another example is in the organizational committee. Okay, so that's it, the discussion about communications in the organization. I will see you in other videos.